And today will be a showcasing of some of these projects and some of these stories, which are still very much alive on the ground. And the question of accountability will always be asked of the ADB. We also appreciate the annual governors meeting to allow this independent space for us as civil society, because that shows you that the bank is willing to learn from sometimes it mistakes that it does on the ground. And the courage to be open, to be criticized, is how you can do better. I think that applies to all of us. If we choose not to be criticized, how will we ever know that we need to be better? I love working in the NGO Forum on ADB. I've been the executive director since 2012. It's been 14 years. I came in as a boy, I think, with hair on my head. I don't have any anymore. And mostly it has been challenging the bank. So I think I've taken up enough of time. Should we go in? All right. So formally welcoming everybody to the panel. We are titled Advancing Safeguards and Accountability here at the ADB. Firstly, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Titi Soentoro. Sorry? The house rules. The house rules for today are actually quite simple. Most of it is taken care of by the ADB. This is going to be an independent, meaningful space. Feel free to add your questions into the pigeonhole. The ADB will be documenting the proceedings as well and sharing it later on. Pictures will be taken. The first story will be by Ms. Titi Soentoro, who is the Executive Director of AXI Indonesia. She will be sharing a particular case on geothermal project in Indonesia called Dieng 2, which has had multiple issues and concerns, with some serious questions to be asked of structural failures on ADB safeguards delivery. So less from me. I'll pass it on to Ms. Titi Soentoro, who will be joining us online. So on the tech team, if you could patch in Ms. Titi, please. Over to you, Titi.
Thank you. Good afternoon from Indonesia. Good
I think you're on mute. We cannot hear you at the moment.
Okay, now can you hear me now?
Titi, you're audible online. We're just waiting for them to hear you on.
We can't hear. From the tech team, can we check the audio, please, for Ms. Titi Soentoro?
You're audible online. We just have to make sure that it can be broadcasted on the plenary.
Titi, can you say a few words?
Hi.
We need more volume on the speakers, please.
Okay, so good afternoon from Indonesia. Good
Is the audio
Titi, we need you to hold on for just a second. We're trying to get the volume up in the room for your voice.
Okay. For a while, Titi. We're just sorting the audio in the plenary. Hello, this is the tech team.
A bit louder, please.
Are we audible now? Sound check from the tech team. Are we audible?
A bit louder, please, at the back.
Are we audible now?
Better, a little bit louder, please.
Now?
There, yes.
Yes, much better.
Okay.
Titi, over to you. We can hear you fine.
So thank you again. Good afternoon from Indonesia and good morning, Samarkand. First of all, thank you, Ryan, and the NGO Forum on ADB for the opportunity to share the case of geothermal power plant in Indonesia financed by the ADB. The pictures you are facing is the beautiful Dieng Plateau, where ADB financed its geothermal projects. ADB's involvement in geothermal energy development in Indonesia began with technical assistance in 1995, followed by a recommendation for subsidies, privatization, and deregulation, including changing the status of geothermal from an extractive activities to allow the extraction of geothermal reserve in natural and protected areas and forests. Since 2002, ADB has financed 7 geothermal power plants, raising concerns among communities due to reported declines in harvest, scarcity of clean water, air and soil pollution, noise, and perceived threat to existing biodiversity. Additionally, reports have indicated incidents of intimidation and threat towards community that oppose the projects. Slide 2, please. Next slide, please. Building on this, let's zoom in on Dieng Geothermal Power Plant Unit 2, located on the Dieng Plateau, a volcanic highland in central Java, Indonesia, situated at an average altitude of 2,000 meters above sea level. It is a famous tourist destination for its beautiful misty landscapes and ancient Hindu temples. Next slide, please. ADB financed the Dieng Unit 2 geothermal power plant and is preparing financing for Unit 3 and 4. The Dieng Unit 2 is an expansion of Dieng Unit 1, which has been operational since 2002 and managed by Geodipa, an Indonesian state-owned enterprise. The location of Dieng Unit 1 and Unit 2 and the plant Units 3 and 4 are in areas with high population density, close to community houses, homestays, hotels, restaurants, and the community's potato fields. Next slide, please. The Dieng community has opposed Dieng Unit 1 due to pollution of land, water, and air, which they state has led to health issues and reduced harvest and income. The clean water shortage due to the increased concern that more community women will suffer in ADB finance geothermal projects. Next slide, please. In conclusion, I can say that ADB did not consider the negative experience of communities on the Dieng Plateau during the Dieng Unit 2, 1, while expanding and financing Unit 2 and proceeded to plan Unit 3 and 4. The cumulative impacts are ignored. This ongoing disregard for suffering and the efforts of affected communities to protect their land and resources must end. Next slide. The ADB should address its current flaws by better protecting women and vulnerable groups from negative project impacts, ensuring women participation in meaningful consultation on projects in their area, and establishing a grievance redress mechanism that effectively address gender issue. The ADB also needs to take responsibility and provide solution for indirect, long-term, and cumulative harms caused by its project funding. The last pictures you see here is posters by the community against the projects. Thank you for listening. Over back to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Titi. A round of applause for Titi. Thank you for being patient and bearing through the technical difficulties. We've heard the structural issues. Resettlement plans were not released timely. The coercion and retaliation is real. Moving on to the next story, it's from Pakistan. It's about the Balakot hydropower plant, which has been co-financed between the Asian Development Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. I would request Mr. Hossein Jarwar, CEO of the Indus Consortium Coalition, to say his piece on the Balakot Hydro. Hossein Bhai, over to you. Hossein Bhai will be joining from Pakistan online.
Thank you very much, Ryan Bhai, for inviting me to share the experiences of the Balakot hydropower project in Pakistan. Can you display my presentation?
Sorry,
Yeah.
for a while we're loading the presentation.
Okay.
Apologies for that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So next. As Ryan Bhai has mentioned that I'm sharing the safeguard standards of ADB are not being fully implemented in the Balakot hydropower project because we are working with communities And there are several reasons due to that these safeguards are not implemented in the project, because we have found that there is a inadequate community consultations in the process, especially the meaningful consultations with the communities, and the consistency of the consultations, and the inclusivity, and also the gender responsive consultations are missing from the entire process of the Balakot hydropower project, and it was shared by the community. Then we also found there is a lack of free prior informed consultation process with affected communities. During this, communities also share about the weak grievance redress mechanism, because there were low awareness among the communities about the accessibility of the grievance redress mechanism, and also there was a lack of timely and transparent resolution of those issues shared by the community. At field, we also found that there was a very weak field level monitoring by the ADB, and it created a gap between the ADB commitments and also the implementation at the reality, because communities has also shared that ADB team, some instances they visited to the field area, but they did not conducted a meaningful consultation with the affected communities, and especially those who raised the voices on various environmental, social, and the compensation issues. Next. Yeah. Apart from that, there were some barriers to accessing the ADB accountability mechanisms. Like the affected communities were actually unaware of the compliance receiving officer or the team, and there were also a limited support of the file complaints. Especially there were some complex issues, especially about the language barrier, because this project is located in a very remote area where entire community is not that much fluent even in Urdu national language. So the translation of the accountability mechanism framework in local languages was another primary issue identified by the communities. And due to that, there was no evidence of proactive outreach by the project authorities to the affected communities to address those issues. And we also found that there was an absence of effective compliance review and correction action, and lack of correction action plan of implementation, and the weak follow-up on the safeguard violations at the project level were also noticed. Next. Yeah. I think there is a dire need that if bank truly want to end the suffering of these communities, it is essential for MDBs to prioritize people over the profit in their development projects and the frameworks. And there are some recommendations from the communities that it should be the meaningful process, inclusive process, and it can build the trust among communities and the bank, which was actually lacking in entire process identified by the communities. So there are few suggestions and recommendations that ADB should review the past projects, because it's a legacy of the Asian Development Bank by funding hydro projects, but there is no impact assessment about the previous funded hydro projects on the resettlement, compensation, and ecosystem degradation issues. So there was a community demand that before providing any assistance, they should review the past projects and halt the large hydro financing and the TA guarantees of the mega hydro infrastructure till the study on the delta damages conducted by the bank, because there was a strong voice from the lower riparian communities, especially from the Indus Delta, that there should be a study conducted on the delta damages, because previously Indus Delta was the one of the richest, fifth richest delta of the world. Now it's dying. From 17 creeks, only 2 creeks are now alive which are receiving the fresh water. Otherwise, entire Indus Delta is damaged. And fair compensation issues was also came in the consultation. Community monitoring should be broad-based and promote real renewables by the banks. And last but not the least, ADB should support to the real renewable energy projects like the solar. So I think ADB has also studied that recently Pakistan has imported more than 45,000 megawatt solar panels in last 3 to 4 years in Pakistan. That's equal to Pakistan's total installed electricity capacity, and 20,000 megawatt has been deployed via rooftop solar and net metering, which solar adoption has reduced vulnerability to external shocks like Hormuz disruption. Through the country still faced energy stress due to large hydro output and the limited RLNG imports from the Qatar, but solar has saved Pakistan. And as per the statistics, rapid rooftop solar expansion has saved over 12 billion in fossil fuel imports since 2018, and with additional 6.3 billion will be saved in the end of the 2026. So I think ADB should also support to the real renewables in the countries who are actually growing and facing lot of electricity issues, also the economic issues. And apart from that, there should be a meaningful consultation process and community redress mechanism in place so that communities can get benefit from the safeguarding and accountability mechanisms of the ADB. Thank you, Ryan Bhai.
Thank you, Hussain Bhai. I was just about to beg you for time to cut it off. But thank you for that very valuable input. Moving on, actually, we have an affected community voice from Balakot hydropower area who will be joining us online. I would request Mr. Mukhtar Javed to say his piece. Mukhtar Bhai, if you could continue.
Yeah, good morning, Excellency, distinguished delegates and colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to bring community perspective from Balakot hydropower project, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, Pakistan. So I would like to reflect on a simple question. How can we better align our safeguard commitment with the lived realities of the community? And then I will come to the issue the community, local community are facing. So Balakot hydropower project on the river Konhar is a 300 megawatt initiative contributing to energy security and economic growth of Pakistan, while also creating significant local impact on the land, livelihood, and the ecosystem. So from community perspective, several key social and environmental issues emerge. First of all, biodiversity risk. The project has led to habitat loss, particularly pine, scrub forest, and agriculture land. Critically endangered species are at risk, while mitigation measures such as biodiversity action plan and fishery hatchery remain delayed or unimplemented. So second issue community are facing is the resettlement and compensation issue. Over 3,600 households are affected. Community reported disparity in compensation, limited awareness of policies, and weak consultation, resulting in mistrust and in some cases refusal to accept the compensation. Third issue is the governance and trust deficit. Although grievances mechanism exist, as Jarwar Bhai said, but they are not well understood or accessible. Community highlight limited engagement, weak transparency, and insufficient local representation. Fourth is the labor right and safety. So worker report lack of formal contract, low wages, and restricted freedom of association. So safety concerns are also there and very serious, including reported accident and absence of adequate emergency response system. Fifth one is the environmental pollution and health. Blasting, dust, noise, affecting air quality, well-being, especially for vulnerable groups such as children and the elderly. Sixth one is the damaging houses and infrastructure. Tunnel blasting has caused structural damage to home and water channels with no clear compensation mechanism, disproportionately affecting low-income households. And seventh is water resources impact. So diversion of local water resources has disrupted irrigation, food security, and livelihood for farming community. And this diversion is for the a local construction purpose. Next is eighth point is water management concerns. So improper disposal of muck, excavation material is contributing to soil erosion and water contamination, raising compliance concern with the safeguard standards. So finally, employment inequity. So local community largely remain low-paid, unskilled roles with limited access to skilled employment opportunity, and the non-local peoples are preferred in the jobs. So last but not the least, I would like to request that while the project hold clear strategic importance, so addressing these environmental, social, and governance gap is essential to ensure development remain inclusive, equitable, and fully aligned with the safeguard commitment. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mukhtar Bhai. A round of applause. It is never easy to bring in such harsh realities from the project side into the hallowed discussions of the AGM, being pressed for time as well. DG Ramani, I'm sure you've heard the two cases. I'll come back to you. I'm sure you're analyzing this from a non-compliance point of view. One more case for you. This will be from Ms. Indira Shrish, who is the president of Inbolang, Indigenous Women's Lawyers Association in Nepal, on the Tanahu hydropower plant, which has affected the Magar indigenous community population in Bhimad province. Over to you, Indira ji.
Thank you, Jorle. Namaste.
Again, Indira ji, just pause for a second. We need to fix your audio. Can we get some help here?
Indira, hello. Yes.
Yes, we can hear you,
audio is a
Indira
bit
ji.
low. Indira, can you speak again?
Stay from Nepal. Hello.
Yes, okay.
Okay, thank you. Respected and distinguished delegates, Jorle Namaste. And I am speaking from Nepal. The situation in the Tanahu hydropower project in Nepal reflects a serious gap between ADB safeguard commitment and actual implementation on the ground. Although a strong international, national, and institutional framework exists including ADB Safeguard Policy Statement 2009 is still, and especially Principle 9, and also we have ratified UNDRIP ILO Convention 169 and Nepal Constitution protection indigenous peoples continue to face violation of their land and livelihood rights of indigenous peoples. The project affected around 547 households with around the 75% indigenous peoples and mainly from the indigenous Magar community. Many affected lands and customary and ancestral lands management through traditional systems such as the Magar good system. It is our traditional institutions, and yet these lands remain unrecognized, such it's because they lack formal registration. This situation can be summarized as the safeguard implementation failure to recognize customary land rights of indigenous peoples. Ancestral and customary lands are not legally recognized despite international and ADB safeguards obligations, and exclusion of non-title indigenous commitments. Family without formal land titles are denied for compensation and protections. Lack of meaningful FWIC implementation. We have prior, and informed consent has not been implemented as a genuine decision-making process of indigenous people, and non-transparent land measurement and verification. survey, and land measurement and remain incomplete under and exclusively. And adequate and delayed compensation. Compensation processes are delayed and often fail to restore livelihoods with limited land for land options. So weak accountability and monitoring mechanism, safeguard commitment remain largely paper-based without effective monitoring or enforcement. Failure to implement government decision and safeguard commitments. Even the government of Nepal cabinet decision on verification of non-title indigenous land remains unimplemented. It is going to delaying and delaying. So these failures are not merely administrative gaps. They represent violation of indigenous people's rights, dignity, culture, and livelihoods. Development cannot be considered inclusive or sustainable if it dispossesses indigenous communities from their ancestral lands. So therefore, urgent action to require full implementation of the safeguard policy. Recently, especially Principle 9, and legal recognition of customary indigenous lands, transferring and participatory land verification, genuine effective implementation, and fair compensation, including land for land options, independent accountability mechanisms, immediate implementation of the government commitment on non-title land. If safeguard policies, human rights obligations, and government decisions are not implemented in a timely and effective manner, there must be accountability mechanism and consequences for violation of indigenous peoples and human rights. Failure to implement this commitment should be considered a serious human rights violation, and those responsible must be held accountable under national and international human rights standards. Bridging the gap between policy and practice is essential for justice, accountability, and the credibility of development institutions. It is my plea to ADB. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste, Indiraji. Very, very tough questions asked of the ADB. Just a disclaimer, I think. DG Ramani from the Office of the Compliance Review Panel, we do not consider to be our enemy or representing management. We consider the Office of the Compliance Review Panel an ally in our seeking of accountability and safeguards due diligence. So DG Ramani, over to you. From your lens, these issues of non-compliance, it seems that the issues are recurring. What do you think? Maybe it's already on. Can you?
Hello, can
Yeah.
you hear me? Yeah. All right. Thank you, Rayan, and thank you so much to all the speakers. My name is Ramani Kunanagam, and I'm the chair of the Compliance Review Panel. So as Rayan says, I don't represent management. I also don't represent the impacted communities. We are the independent accountability or complaints mechanisms that people can, if you like, we are like the equivalent of a court of appeal or the Supreme Court, if you like, of the ADB. So you can file your complaints or submit your complaints to us. Our policy requires that you should have first made management aware and raised these issues with management. And if you're not satisfied with the response or you don't get a response, then you can bring the complaint to us. And then we have a process by which we look at it. The accountability mechanism is two parts. There is the problem solving or dispute resolution unit, which essentially mediates a solution between those raising the complaint, ADB, and the borrowing party. That's headed up by my colleague Imrana Jalal. Unfortunately, is unable to be here today, and the compliance review panel, of which I'm the chair. Just some background. So Rayan, you want me to respond to these three complaints, and it's open-ended. All right, thank you. So I made the following observations. We have essentially three case studies from three different parts of Asia: Indonesia, Pakistan, and Nepal. Some of the commonalities I see in these complaints, all these projects have been ongoing for a long time, and these issues seem to have been percolating, or even I could say have been frontline issues also for a long time. And from the project affected person's point of view, these issues remain unresolved and open-ended. I also note two of the three complaints relate to hydropower. All the complaints have resettlement as a key issue, lack of consultation or inadequate consultation, not being included. Two complaints talk about, or all three, no, two talk about free prior informed consent, not being adhered to as per ADB's policies. And what else did I see? Yes, and on indigenous and customary rights. So there are some commonalities. I note one of the complaints, the Balakot hydropower complaint, was brought to the compliance review panel. And from what I understand, from what the speaker said, Mr. Hussain, it was not found eligible by the compliance review panel. On that, I'm afraid I'm unable to respond because I don't know the details of this case. It was before my time, but I will look into it to understand better why it was not found eligible. I do want to say that if you have any new issues that have come up on this project, you have a right to still come back to the accountability mechanism, new issues or new evidence that you have. So the other complaint, although Indira did not mention it, on the Nepal Tanaho hydropower project, we have a complaint on that, but not related to the issue brought up by Indira Ji. We have a complaint related to a downstream community, and we have just completed our compliance review and submitted our report to management. My understanding, the issue with the Maga community and recognition of their rights, customary rights, that complaint is with my counterpart unit, the problem-solving unit. And from what I understand, there still has been no resolution to that. So what are my observations here? Maybe I would say these are questions that I would want to know more information. First and foremost, I'm keen to understand why these issues remain open-ended and ongoing, and why you believe, for example, in the Indonesia geothermal project, that none of these issues have been resolved. This project has been ongoing for a very long time. You raise very serious concerns, both on the environmental side and on the social side. And we do recognize that, geothermal is part of the sort of energy transition strategy of ADB. And I think what you are highlighting is that, nevertheless, yes, it may meet the strategic objectives of energy transition to a more sustainable source of energy, but there are very big environmental and social impacts. And from your perspective, the do no harm principle, therefore, has not been adhered to. So one comment I would make, without noting the details of this case, and without passing any judgment, because obviously this is not a complaint with a compliance review with the compliance review panel is there is no trade-off in the do no harm principle. So it may, achieving one objective does not allow you to trade off another objective, which is part of the do no harm. So whether it is a conventional energy project or, transition, the full quantum and intent of do no harm has to be met. So this would be an observation I would make. I understand also, and you mentioned several times about the issues around intimidation, about threats, about retaliation, and therefore there is also an inbuilt fear in raising this, I presume, even including with the accountability mechanism. And this is, of course, a very big concern. I do want to say some words about retaliation. Both ADB management and operations and the accountability mechanism have a zero tolerance approach towards retaliation. And most recently, in November last year, ADB launched a dedicated website on its zero tolerance commitment to retaliation. And there's also a statement in there from the accountability mechanism on a zero tolerance approach. So it is very disturbing to hear that there are these issues and yet people fear to raise this with the mechanism. I think this is something we would need to look into and understand a lot better.
I have to
Cut me?
curb you,
All right.
curb you off.
All right.
yeah.
Okay.
Because I'll come back to you.
Okay.
We have 3 more interventions and we'd love to hear your insights. And thank you for the honesty and the integrity in those responses. Going back to our schedule, I'll go to Sukarel from OT Watch Mongolia on the urban development project. Over to you, Sukarel.
Okay. Thank you. So can I have my PowerPoint, which is not really a very professional PowerPoint, just kind of notes for myself. So we've been involved with ADB's urban development projects in Mongolia since 2017. We filed a complaint in 2018 and 2020. In 2018, it was about lack of information disclosure, no consultations, no land acquisition, resettlement plan, unfair compensation, and intimidation. In 2020, it was more about, can we have the next slide? More about construction impacts on plots and houses around the construction, roads and everything. So the Office of Special Project Facilitator was very good in terms of that, regardless of COVID-19, we have been able to negotiate a package to improve compensation, to develop a livelihood support program. There was an MOU signed with the municipality and all stakeholders involved, including complainants. Now, what was important about this MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, is that it was agreed that it will be applied to all ADB-financed urban development projects. However, this didn't happen. Now, one of the results was that a management grievance redress mechanism was created after those complaints. But because ADB, when it introduced the land titling in Mongolia, which does not recognize the traditional land use arrangements. For example, in Mongolia, households live in a hotel, which is 2 to 3 households on one plot. But land titling, they issue a license just to one family, and then the rest don't have the titles. And when compensation is negotiated, then those who don't have land titles don't get the right compensation, don't get the right compensation. So this is one very big issue, not recognized by the bank and by the government. And there is no legislation that protects the rights of people on those. Now, ADB has, aside from GADIP, ADB has affordable housing project, greenhouse project, sub-center developments, bus terminal creation, and intersection connectivity projects, which all acquire more land. And as a result, we have calculated roughly that would be involving 23,000 plus households, which if multiplied by 4.5 family numbers is 100,000 citizens in Ulaanbaatar affected by ADB's projects. Now, the grievance redress mechanism, the requirement to engage with management before you file a complaint, we've used this process and got very strong pushback. No meetings, no information, full information disclosure. And one thing that I want to raise here is that the bank requires good faith effort from communities, but we don't see good faith effort from the bank itself, from its management grievance mechanism. And this is an important thing that I want to raise here. And the usual, as the previous cases, lack of information disclosure, and when there is information provided, I will go show this response. This is the GADIP Project Management Officer's letter to the resident representative of ADB. And in this letter, he claims that, see the yellow dots there, that GADIP Tranche 1 was related to the sub-center development, and persons complaining from that sub-center do not fall under any of their activities, and therefore they're not eligible. But here you see, oh, wait a minute, I think oops. All right, I'm kind of getting, yeah, this one. If you look at the project document itself, it says that there is a tranche 2 under this project, and that covers self-financing, and sub-center has a new role as a model for that 20-minute city development in Mongolia's capital. So the project document itself says that they should be eligible. They should be eligible. And please note that at the bottom there says that that new housing is going to be housing redevelopment. And then this is the most, this complaint is the one that hasn't given up. Other 13, 14 households have almost given up. This person hasn't given up. And you can see that her house is surrounded by housing construction on both sides. So to end my presentation, I don't have recommendations. I got more questions. There is no effective process. There seem to be more layers put in place, but there's no remedy. There's no remedy. And the question comes up whether actually management grievance mechanism is created to prevent complaints to the accountability mechanism at all costs, even by lying. And again, there should be good faith effort on both sides. And then other questions that, looking at this case, who will oversee over my management grievance mechanism? There was a government capacity building specifically for safeguards compliance. There's no report. There's no report. We're asking for the report. And then ADB's been involved in Ulaanbaatar city urban development since 1997, starting with the legal framework. And I think my question is it good time to evaluate the urban development programs in Mongolia? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sokaral. This is a tricky one, DG Ramani. Tranche 1 says Selbe is not a part of the project, unofficial response. Tranche 2 says it's going to be the model for the development to happen in Tranche 2 and 3. So these are fundamental questions in terms of project design and what is included, what is excluded, and the lives of people falling through the cracks of reports and policy design. I do want to address one thing. This particular panel in this entire 3-day program of the ADB annual meeting is the one which independently brings to surface evidences of safeguards violations in projects. It is advertised for this panel that the head of the Office of the Safeguards is going to be present as a responder to these evidences. 30 minutes was the asked amount of time that he will be late. We're officially in 40 minutes. I really have to ask Bruce Dunn's absence here in listening to these projects. Where else should he be except to hear what is going wrong in safeguards delivery? So that's a question which we will take back from NGO Forum away from the AGM. Moving on, I will ask Yanara Ayadbeva, lead of NASVEC Public Finance, to share her presentation.
Thank you, Ryan. Dear colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to discuss such an important topic. ADB has done significant work to develop its safeguard system. However, our regional national experience shows that the gap between policy and practice remains. ADB safeguards are strong on paper. In practice, risks are shifted to communities. This is especially noticeable in cross-border projects. In projects such as CASA 1000, we see challenges in the areas of consultation and compensation transparency. In Karak transport corridors, resettlement and access to information remain sensitive issues. We have identified serious concerns related to potential violations of the principles of transparency, accountability, and good governance during project implementation, including publicity disclosed instances of possible corruption. According to public sources, the road was built in a hurry for PR and contains numerous design and construction errors. It's noted that the route passes through avalanche and rockfall zones and also has breach and safety issues. The project's completion date has been repeatedly postponed to 2027 to 2028, indicating serious systemic implementation problems. Claims have also been made in the public space regarding possible embezzlement of funding during the project implementation and insufficient oversight. We believe these circumstances may indicate insufficient compliance with ADB policies and procedures, including project oversight, risk management, and accountability requirements. Community participation remains limited in the region's energy projects. Taking together these cases reflect broader structural challenges. delays of disclosure, limited participation, and insufficient accountability. General conclusions for the region, consultations are perfunctory. Safeguards are used as a checkbox. Complaints requests are not yet leading to systematic changes. Lack of real accountability. The key issue is in our view, is not so much the existence of safeguards, but the mechanism for their implementation. We see these areas where improvements are possible. First, strengthen mandatory compliance. Stakeholder participation should influence decisions. Second, strengthen accountability. It's necessary to more clearly link safeguards compliance with consequences. Third, improve the transparency and independence of monitoring. Requirements for ADB, mandatory consideration of CSO recommendations, introduce sanctions for non-compliance with safeguards, publish data in an accessible form, strengthen the accountability mechanism. Critical question. When will safeguards begin to protect people, not the reputation of projects? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chinara. We'll switch online for one more story from the Philippines. I would call upon Aaron Pedrosa, the legal lead at PMCJ, to share his input on the Visayas baseload coal power plant and the complaint at CRP. Aaron, over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. Good afternoon from the Philippines. Good morning over there. Thank you for having me join this panel. Can you share my presentation, please? Yeah. So my presentation is entitled Lessons Never Learned, looking at the Visayas baseload accountability mechanism engagement experience. Just a quick walk down memory lane. It's the 200 megawatt coal-fired power plant, touted as a clean coal technology, which was co-financed by the Asian Development Bank together with the Korean Export-Import Bank. And we lodged the complaint in 2011. In fact, with the compliance review panel by May 25th, if I'm not mistaken, it's already the 15th year since we filed the complaint. And this is largely because of environmental health concerns experienced by the affected communities, those living nearby. And you raise all those complaints prior to the process with the operations. And then the policy was, before you could proceed with the CRP, you have to undergo the mediation process under the Office of the Special Project Facilitator. We exited the OSPF, and essentially our complaint before the CRP, next slides, please, is that ADB failed to comply its safeguard policy statement, its public communication policy, its policies on clean energy and public consultations, in addition, the conduct of environmental impact assessment, and the subsequent disclosure, including details on coal ash disposal, and they all did not comply with ADB standards. Next slide, please. And revelations, next slide, yeah, is that there's glaring lack of due diligence from the environmental impact assessment, coal ash management, the lack of thorough environmental audit of existing coal plant operations, to the environmental and social harms, lack of environmental management plan for the coal ash disposal of the historical coal ash dump sites, failure to disclose the EIA, among others. And ultimately, the compliance review panel pointed out policy violations, environmental policy, involuntary resettlement, policy on public consultation, public disclosure, and incorporation of social dimensions into ADB operations, and the energy policy. However, the safeguards remain bound to the structural and policy gaps that in the first place gave rise to the violations. So our argument is the safeguards would only do so much if the policies in place would actually sanction the violations to happen. And at this point, we zero in on the 2009 energy policy, which allowed the establishment of coal plants, despite the clear science debunking clean coal, the clean coal myth. No? And they say that the technology used then in 2011 for the Visayas baseload power development project would use the circulating fluidized bed combustion technology. And it is cleaner compared to conventional or pulverized coal technology. However, our studies showed it was actually producing 4 times more coal combustion waste. Next slide. And we look at and compare the existing energy policy in effect now. That's energy policy to 2021 as against the 2009 energy policy. Although ADB has not financed investments in coal-fired power plants since 2013, even though the 2009 energy policy allowed such financing, the current energy and climate context presents the opportunity and rationale to support the phase-out of coal-fired power plants. We must bear in mind that the old policy, according to this energy policy 2021, no longer aligned with global consensus on climate change, the ongoing global transformation of the energy sector, gender equality goals, etc., etc. So that as a departure from that old policy, and this is again proof of what we say, the structures that are in place that gave rise to the violations in the first place. It says ADB will offer limited and conditional support for natural gas, at the same time looking at the phase out of coal plants. Therefore, they come to us with the energy transition mechanism and gas financing. Next slide. This is where we say lessons haven't been learned, because we view the energy transition mechanism as a mechanism to provide new lease on life for coal plants, thus resuscitating a dying industry using public finance to bail out coal plants without addressing the harms, such as our experience in the Visayas baseload power development project. We won at the CRP level, the monitoring function was terminated, but no remedies came for the communities. And then you have gas, as a transition fuel, because they want to move away from the dirty fossil fuel that is coal. But once again, in the same argument that we raised in 2011 when we filed a complaint, gas is also a fossil fuel, and it emits more methane compared to coal. Therefore, it defeats the climate imperatives that even the bank has acknowledged. Finally, last slide, as a conclusion, we say that for safeguards to happen, structural changes must happen, and the safeguards will always fall short when the ADB looks the other way, operation and orientation-wise. From the point of view and the standpoint of affected communities, remedies will remain elusive unless ultimately the Asian Development Bank is overhauled. Unless ultimately the structures that allow the violations to happen in place, that undermine the safeguards that should deliver the remedies and meaningful outcomes for affected communities, are still in effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Very powerful input from Aaron, and asking the question on structural changes in ADB to do better in safeguards delivery. Taking a segue now from the safeguards policy itself, just to give everyone a sense on where things are in terms of the calendar at the ADB is also reviewing its accountability mechanism policy. Now, this policy has been operational since 2012, so it's been a long time coming. What does that mean in terms of safeguards on compliance at the project level? What does that mean for affected communities who want to file complaints? In order to address these questions, I'd call on Radhika Goyal, Policy Associate of Accountability Council, to walk us through. Can the microphone for Radhika be fixed or a replacement microphone be given? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Radhika, and Accountability Council, like many panelists here, advises communities who want to file to independent accountability channels across DFIs, and we advocate for stronger accountability mechanisms like the ADB's AM. We believe that independent accountability mechanisms like the AM holds the promise of facilitating meaningful redress, of promoting institutional learnings that prevent future harm, and ensuring that ADB meets its policy commitments. But how do these channels fare in practice? So we recently published a report where we analyzed publicly available information from over 2,000 cases that have been filed to IAMs worldwide and conducted 45 interviews to answer this question. And we found that IAMs are capable of facilitating creative, responsive, and sometimes even transformative forms of remedy, ranging from cash compensation to policy reform, land restitution, investments in community infrastructure, and even apologies. And yet, this type of remedy remains rare. And as we've heard again and again from our panelists today, is dwarfed by the size of harm that occurs. And this holds for ADB too. In practice, safeguards and accountability are not prioritized. They're secondary concerns or traded off, with ADB's other priorities. And one reflection to add here is that ADB repeatedly funds clients who have yet to redress harm in existing complaints, sending the message that redressing harm is perhaps not a condition to receiving ADB financing. So coming back to our report, we have many recommendations and findings, but I want to focus on one that is particularly relevant for the bank management. So this is about the independence of the AM and how its processes are often undermined, which has real consequences to how accessible the mechanism is and how capable it is of facilitating redress. So independence is important because it guarantees legitimacy and trust. Independence is important both to problem solving and to compliance investigation process and to the general administrative functioning of the AM. In a problem-solving process, independence allows for neutrality, which is a precondition for communities to develop trust and belief in the process. Unfortunately, at the ADB, the SPF has a reporting line to the precedent, and this perception of lack of independence has led to mediation processes unraveling in the past. With compliance review processes, even though independence from management is built into the policy, there are other ways in which it is undermined, namely that even when there is a preliminary finding that non-compliance has happened and this could lead to serious harm, the board debates on whether to start an investigation or not. And this debate is very much informed by what management's views on whether an investigation to happen or not is. And so even there, you're not completely free from management influencing whether investigation happens or not. Independence is also crucial to who is eligible to lead the mechanism, who appoints this person, who resources the mechanisms, and all of these are sites where control is exercised over the AM and how effective it is for communities. But I think what animates this is an idea that independence leads to a confrontational approach to accountability, which is not helpful for solving problems or correcting issues. And so then there's an attempt made to strike an appropriate level of independence. And this is also why, in our view, eligibility processes are so complex and why so many cases are not able to make it to the independent mechanism, because there's a preference for solving problems in-house. And so to not allow the independent mechanism to have oversight over it. And I'd like to respond to that really quickly, which is that independent accountability mechanisms are already striking the balance between true external accountability and an internal process. So we should be wary of renegotiating this balance towards lesser independence is, I think, the first thing. And secondly, we can accept that receiving a complaint poses many challenges for management. And not least of all, that it is an extremely uncomfortable and discomforting experience as well. But I think it's also important to move past this discomfort and see the importance of a meaningful and genuine response to an accountability mechanism complaint. And I think that the independence of the AM, the transparency of the AM, or how ADB resolves disputes can't be compromised because of this discomfort. Because for what it's worth, on the other side of the discomfort is communities at risk of losing land, risk of losing livelihoods. And so I think that would have been my question for Bruce today, if he has any reflections on how do you move past this narrative where, that's why we're stuck right now, even in the review. And maybe just to end here now, I think these issues lead themselves to clear recommendations, and these recommendations have been fed into the policy review time and again by CSOs and have been shared here today as well. And so we know that ADB wants to align its ENS standards with peer institutions. They've taken steps to do that. They've taken steps to sign FMRF agreements that even denies a community the ability to access the AM in the first place, where they're not the lead financier. But there is a resistance to that when it comes to accountability. And I think we really hope that this review addresses this. And we look forward to seeing the draft disclosure.
Also, a warm welcome to Bruce Dunn, head of the Office of the Safeguards. Thank you for finally making it. I almost lost hope. All right. So, yeah, make yourself comfortable. We've had a few presentations here on projects. Bruce, I'll probably pass it on to you. You're coming in a little bit cold because, a lot of project presentations have taken place, but you've heard a lot of these projects before. You've been in Fridays on the field with us. So a few words from you. I think it's on.
Already on?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, you can hear me? Okay, great. Well, firstly, thank you very much for all of you from civil society to come and join us here in Samarkand for ADB's annual meeting. I think this is one of the first civil society events. So looking forward to engaging actually over this week. And apologies, I was double booked, so I've just moved from another session. Now, okay, so I'm missing some of the benefit of the discussions that have just been held. But look, I think, and based on some of the sessions that I've joined recently with the Tales from the Field, certainly there's been challenges. Certainly there are lessons learned that we have to take from past projects. But I do want to say that ADB is very committed to learning through that process. Our new environmental and social framework was very much a learning process. Actually, that's why it took us almost 4 years to bring the new policy forward. We did a very large number of background studies. We did more engagement with civil society stakeholders and other partners than I think ADB had ever done. And I think it was very appropriate that we actually model that, because environmental and social safeguards and standards really needs to put the whole engagement with communities, with civil society at the forefront. And that was one of the reasons that we now have developed a dedicated standard on stakeholder engagement. And that standard itself is focusing more on understanding what is the context that a project's occurring in. And I think that's something that we have to be much more sensitive to. We do work in challenging contexts, emerging markets. We do work in areas, as we'll be hearing, there's a session that I'm on later in the week where we'll be talking about the need for safe spaces and risks of reprisals. So all of these issues have to be factored into stakeholder engagement. We're also giving a much stronger push on looking at
Apologies for that. We may be having
that
a
we
little
take
bit.
very seriously.
Okay.
You can maybe direct me with a few more specific questions that you'd like me to come into.
Sure.
Thank you.
Perhaps, Ramani, do you want to respond to the presentations now, or?
Thank you. So maybe I can kill two birds with one stone, respond to the presentations, but then that will flow to a question to you, Bruce. So we heard presentations from Mongolia and the Philippines, and what was the other one?
From Kyrgyzstan.
Kyrgyzstan. And, you know, of course, the concerns are inadequate consultation, lack of consultation, the grievances that have been raised have not really been responded to. The prior good faith efforts is only required on the part of the community to access the mechanism, but not on the part of management. And also, I think this would flow, I think, Bruce, to you, because the question was specifically asked about whether the GRS process in ADB has been designed to prevent communities from accessing the independent accountability mechanism. I think you are much better suited to answer that than myself, Bruce. But I mean, aside from the various safeguard issues, and also in the case of the Philippines, it did go through a compliance review 15 years ago, I think, if I remember right. And the compliance review findings found a number of non-compliances. I think one of the key points they bring is that despite that, the lack of remedy for the communities, and also what happens in a situation, so this would be another question to you, Bruce, what happens in a situation where the safeguards with its do no harm principle is at odds with another policy in ADB? So the two policy that you could have a situation where two policies may actually contravene each other, one would undermine the other, and this was in the context of coal and energy transition.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you very much, Ramani. That was a good catch up, and for you from the accountability mechanism to make sure that I'm accountable to actually following up with the questions. So thank you. Yes, I'm sure you did beforehand. Okay, so on lack of consultation, yes. I think this is a culture that we have to change. It's something that I've been talking about internally. We actually have a change management program for our new ESF, for our staff, and also for our developing member countries and clients. And I think one of the challenging issues is, do we value stakeholder engagement as a fundamental part of the process? And I have to say, for a development organization, stakeholder engagement has to be central. You know, if you're targeting, you know, benefits of a project for the people, it has to involve the people. So I think that's a key shift. But I see a big challenge in those mindsets. If stakeholder engagement is seen as just, you know, something we have to hold an event, you know, we do a short town hall event, we gather a few inputs, that's not really meaningful. So we have to engage with the local community on a much more meaningful level. So I fully take that on board. Grievance mechanisms also have to be effective, and this has been a challenge. We had actually an internal review from ADB's Auditor General's office a couple of years ago now, and then there was a follow-up review. What they found in short was that all of the projects do have grievance mechanisms, but the big challenge is whether they're truly effective. And I think that's what we hear from many of you. The standard 10 that we now have for the ESF makes it a lot clearer in terms of what the expectations are, and also making it very clear that those grievance mechanisms have to be accessible, they have to be safe. And if someone doesn't know that the grievance mechanism is there, or if it's not responsive or not accessible, or they're fearful for some reason, that's obviously not going to be effective. So that is absolutely not what we want to see. So that's change management, building capacity, and we're putting a lot of resources into that. Now the question, and Ramani, thank you for rephrasing it around what's now being proposed on the management grievance redress service. What's the intent with that? Now, actually, this is something that ADB has been doing for many, many years, and it's already embedded in our safeguard policy statement. It's already very clear in the ESF that management has a role to be able to support affected people. And if they have not had success with a grievance mechanism at the project level, or they don't feel that that's going to be the appropriate resolution, they do come to us. Or sometimes you in civil society come to us in management. And we have had systems in place to address this. But going back several years, ADB was a bit more fragmented. Each one of our regional departments, each one of our resident mission officers had different ways of dealing with this. And we were not finding that we really had a good central understanding about grievance management, or we didn't have the data to be able to track it in the portfolio, or we weren't bringing the right skills to resolve these. So the Management Grievance Redress Service is really an attempt by us to improve, to professionalize the way that we respond to grievances, and to do that earlier, right? Because I think anyone who's had a grievance in your life, you know that if you get a quick response, if there is someone willing to listen who is actually taking it seriously, that is the best form of action. So that's what our ambition is. We've recently hired a new advisor to head that, and I'm building a team. We need to be working, though, with accountability mechanism. Those mechanisms should be there, and we're very much committed to the accountability mechanism as an institution and making sure the policy update. But I can assure you the Management Grievance Redress Service is not intended to avoid accountability, but just strengthen ADB's system and responses overall. And then finally, you mentioned about clash of policies. So now something we actively did with our ESF was to try and rationalize some of the policies, because we have our environmental and social requirements were actually referred to in many other policies. And if you look at the new policy, you'll see actually that many of those
Apologies, everyone. We're just having a delay in broadcast from our plenary. We are resolving it in the back end. Hang on, please. Thank you.
institution to make sure that all of our policies are actually implemented. And the board, of course, is our final arbiter on those decisions, as well as accountability. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. I'll let you enjoy that. I have a million questions, but I'll save that for a headquarter visit, and I'll probably go to the floor. We have a little bit of time. Are there any questions which folks wants to raise, either to the speakers? I see Peter Hobel from CE Bankwatch. Can somebody get him a microphone? I see Eugene next. Ice, over here on the right. Peter, if you could stand up, thank you. Kindly introduce yourself as well. The mic's not working. Can someone help?
Yeah, again.
Okay, hopefully it's working. My name is Petr Hlobil. I'm with the Bankwatch Network. It was very, very interesting presentation. Now the bank is planning to enter the Rogun Dam. 50 to 60,000 people to be resettled. In the country where it's extremely difficult to say anything that question anything what the government is doing. Now you talk about building the team, how the grievance mechanism will work, etc., etc. But it's extremely difficult to imagine that under those circumstances, those people's voice will be heard, that they could be raising the questions about the quality of the resettlement, about the quality of compensation, because those might be seen by the government as something which is critical. I know that you have a no reprisal policy, but how this policy will apply on the government who is doing a repression on their citizens on the daily basis. So, Bruce, I really would like to get a bit more from how you see this sort of the oversight of the grievances mechanisms will be working in the real life circumstances, which would be based on the countries where this institution is working, not on experience from the Western Europe or US.
Thank you, Peter. I'll just collect one more question, Bruce, if I may. Eugene, can someone get a microphone on the far left of me? Eugene, kindly introduce yourself as well. I'll wait for the microphone.
Eugene Simonov, International Coordinator of the Rivers Without Boundaries Coalition, which has Central Asian organization based in Kazakhstan and working in the region. I didn't know that Peter was going to talk about this project, but my question also relates to other aspects of the same disastrous Ragun hydropower project, which is one of the biggest projects here, at least in the water infrastructure and energy. We see that we as a collective of coalition of more than 10 NGOs developed a number of reports and which present a clear evidence that so far the environmental impact assessment being done in the World Bank does not reflect key harms that may occur, and there is a systemic denial of those harms plugged into the environmental and social assessment process as it's being performed. We made all potential funders aware and tried to seek contact with them to preemptively discuss how to deal with this situation before it's too late. Unfortunately, we were denied access to any safeguard officers in the ADB, and they always ask us to do something tomorrow. We get these mañanas each time we come to them with very polite letters, and we got it yesterday the last time. When they will be ready, they will come back to us. It will be too late. And therefore, we are very worried by rumors that this project will further enter mutual reliance framework in which ADB will become fully and officially unaccountable for any harms because it will be all on the World Bank. As far as we understand this mutual reliance framework, which we blamed and asked not to implement, and we promised that it will be implemented on very benign, lightweight projects first to test it out for several years. So what is the situation now? What are your tools to prevent harm before decision is made? Because after that, your ability to prevent this harm will be close to zero.
Thank you, Eugene. We do want a response from Bruce, right? So for Bruce, can I take one more, or do you want to respond?
Reliance, yeah, on mutual reliance, definitely.
Yeah. Do you want to respond to Ragun, or do you want me to take one more?
Why don't we take those two, and then if time allows, we can go for another one. Happy to answer more questions, or of course me, some of you on the sidelines as well. Let me respond to those. Firstly, Ragun Dam, ADB has not actually yet made a final decision. This has not gone to our board of directors. We're looking at it very carefully. And I'm personally very happy to meet and have further discussions. Eugene, we will be meeting, and I'm sure that's a project that we'll be discussing along the lines. I think the key issue, and I'll try and take a broader perspective for all projects, but this would apply to Ragun as well. As you say, it is very important for us to have robust assessments. And if you're coming into a large transaction where there has already been work done by other partners, yes, you want to consider that. You don't want to necessarily duplicate that work, but if there are still some gaps, some deficiencies, you have to work on those. And I think civil society are important partners for us in terms of identifying issues, supplementing assessments. And that's exactly what we are doing in the Ragun case. ADB's been continuing to meet with the World Bank, with the other financing partners, continuing to have discussions. And we're making sure that we're happy before we actually do take that transaction forward. But I can share more details. On full mutual reliance, also, I can assure you, actually, we've had discussions and we will not be, at least at this stage, be applying the full mutual reliance. The World Bank has also felt, as a very large transaction, that it's not appropriate for that full mutual reliance. We are, though, trying to work with the government in terms of how do we make clear, and this is a broader issue, when you have a project that brings multiple financiers with multiple standards, how do you align along a very clear, common set of safeguard requirements? because it's very difficult for a government to actually implement a project when you've got everyone coming to you with different requirements. And you actually have to make sure that that's clear, that it gets one set of requirements that is then implemented for those requirements and is legally required through the contracts. So I think that's an important issue as well. I want to come to also the question, Peter, you talked about, you mentioned Rogan, but I think your issue around local voices being heard, and especially if they're critical. Now, this is fundamental. This is actually one of the reasons why in our new policy, something that we did not have previously is clear focus on a contextual analysis. And that's something that we're doing internally because it may be sensitive. You might actually see, well, are the conditions for meaningful stakeholder engagement, are they there? Have there been, for example, risks to labor, maybe violations of labor standards in a country that you're working in, and what does that mean in terms of the way that you actually design the project? This is very fundamental. And so it may be in cases where you will do everything that you can to strengthen the system, but we will also then need to look about, well, how do we operate? How does ADB make itself available for those sensitive discussions? And we do that. We'll be talking more in the session on reprisals, where we have civil society actors come to us and say, look, I've been impacted or I'm concerned about something. How can we talk to you safely so that you can take action on something that the government's not taking action on? And so that's a key area that we're willing to engage in more. And I would say honestly that we have to learn and strengthen our own systems. Well, I'll stop there. And
thank you, Bruce. I think those secure lines of communication are essential. I'll take just one more question to the lady. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I have questions and requests to you because I am Tolikan Ismailova, woman human rights defender, director of Birduino Human Rights Movement from Kyrgyzstan. And I promise ADB key people who create decision-making process talk with Uzbek government, because I stopped from morning 8:45 until today, until now, and I spent 3 hours and I have registration officially, and I came with a lot of expectation talking about victims from rural area, and I want to give some voice because we have difficult situation, not only climate change, we have new risk and disaster in Central Asia from Afghanistan, from other side. That's why I think you should talk with the government, don't create difficulty for participants, especially for women human rights defenders. From yesterday, they tried to create a lot of barriers for all of us. Thank you so much. We should have inclusive, equal participation for decision-making process, and we should give our recommendation from local to global level. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking truth to power. So Bruce, I'll probably let you respond to that. I think it goes back to what Peter was saying. In case of repressive regimes, how does ADB ensure not only at the regional level where you get voices being heard, but more at the national level? What is ADB resident missions doing at the project site to ensure voices are heard?
All right, thank you very much for sharing those important words. And I think if you're referring to some challenges in terms of registration, I can say that our team, Heidi, our head of our Civil Society Centre, have been working very closely between ADB at a senior management level and the organisers here to make sure that we have a fully inclusive session. So I certainly apologise if that had taken some time for any participants, but we value you being here. And it's very important that we have this platform for inclusive dialogue. So thank you for being with us. Now, yeah, look, of course, there are challenging dialogues to be had in some cases. We are willing to take that forward. Obviously, it can be sensitive. We need to look carefully at the context and the issues. If it relates very specifically to ADB project, to ADB financing, then of course we need to take that forward directly and the implications for the project. And of course, a project that cannot have meaningful stakeholder engagement is not a sustainable project. It's not one that's in compliance with our policy. So that's something that we have to have a direct dialogue. Sometimes civil society, though, will bring broader issues, and those issues may be beyond necessarily the project issue. In those cases, we will have dialogues with our other MDB counterparts and see what is the right shape and form for us to be able to bring dialogue. And there will be sensitivities there, but we do take all of those issues very seriously and appreciate you bringing them forward to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. We've reached the top of the time for this particular session, so I'll choose the last minute to give a vote of thanks to all the speakers, both online and offline. A round of applause for all the civil society speakers. A special thanks to DG Ramani for holding on to the hot seat and bringing perspectives from the CRP. And thank you, Bruce, for joining us. Even though you were pressed for time, I think you managed to at least give meaning to this particular panel, because we really need to listen to management, especially on these issues. On the project levels, many things have not been answered. I can see Socorel wondering about Tranche 1, Selby communities, and Tranche 2. I'm sure within the next 3 days, Bruce, you will make time to listen to civil society. And thank you for this patient and very, very robust audience. Special thanks to all of you. I hope you have a great annual meeting ahead of you. Thanks to everyone online as well, and to the translators and the tech team. Appreciate it. Thank you.